Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find the tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Thank you for tuning into the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And again, special guests, Megan and Dom Benninger. Hey guys.
Hi.
All right, so if you missed their introduction, you can go back to the last episode and listen to their backstory. For this episode, we're going to get in and just jump right in with both feet and talk about the database that you guys started, baptistaccountability.org. As you mentioned, you have 400 and how many?
476, I believe.
476 who are on this database. This number grows by the day. This was launched back in February of this year, so it's only been around for several months. And there are already almost 500 on this database, and this just includes the Southern Baptist churches.
It is all Baptist, just to be clear.
Let's clarify that. I mean, this is all Baptist, so it would include, say, I mean, do you want to get into how we qualify who goes in? I mean, it's not just.
I think that was one of the questions that I had is who qualifies. How do you make the database? What does it take to be on baptistaccountability.org?
Okay, so, well, first of all, it has to be Baptist related in some way. And we're pretty generous with that. Like, even people that have maybe spoken at a Southern Baptist convention, or
speakers.
Yeah. And or schools that maybe had Baptist roots, like Liberty University is
by and large founded by
Baptists, although they're not considered Baptist, but we're being generous with Baptist terminology. We the only reason we don't go further than Baptist is because it's just the two of us, and it does take a lot of work to put them in and keep it going.
Right.
Yeah. So
I mean, it covers SBC obviously because the church we were in wasn't an SBC church, but they're into the IFB movement is another branch.
That's what I was going to ask. Yep. Okay.
And what tends to happen with say an abusers, they'll tend to go from church to church, and we don't want them to slip off the radar, right? So if they go from a Baptist church, whether it be IFB, SBC, or whatever kind of Baptist organization, and say they go to another church, they're still on the radar of they have been affiliated with a Baptist organization, and subsequently, and they could go into the database.
And they do tend to stay usually kind of within Baptist because they know how easy it is to get away.
They know the language, they know the culture, they know the people, their circle of friends.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, and they'll also go into non-denominational churches, like they're, in our specific instance, the individual in our church moved from an SBC church to another SBC church, but we also learned that he was preaching at, I believe it was a missionary type of church down in Virginia that wasn't necessarily Baptist to our knowledge. So they tend to move around. So again, we didn't want to limit ourselves just to SBC.
But we also couldn't take on everything.
Right. Yeah. We had to draw the line somewhere because it's literally just the two of us.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll ask some of the guidelines, just questions that I have. Are these current leaders or speakers within the church, or does this include people in the past who you don't know whether they've spoken or preached at a church or organization in the last, say, 5 years or so? Like, what's that criteria?
Yeah, it's not necessarily pastors. Can be anybody who attended a Baptist church even. But I think most of them tend to have been in leadership of some kind. Yeah. Because that's usually how they operate.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have pastors obviously in there, but we also have deacons, and we have worship leaders, youth leaders, youth workers. I mean, it's not just pastors.
There are some that have no leadership, that are in there too. Okay. So any kind of Baptist, and then we do require some kind of corroboration, like some evidence somehow. And that's a hard one to nail down, to tell you exactly what we accept, because we make the decision because it's our database, and we're trying to be as liberal with it as we can be, but being, obviously we're not just, we have had some come in where, it's like, yeah, somebody molested me, and it just sounds off, and there's no evidence. So I would say 99% have either a news article or a blog article or a police record or something.
There's something in the media or a blog or, arrest reports. I mean, there's a ton of information out there existing. And so to your point, Jimmy, I mean, it doesn't necessarily just have to be current, like they're currently in a pulpit.
Oh, yeah.
There are some people that have even been deceased.
Right.
And this database can help maybe victims who were abused maybe a long time ago, because what is the average age of someone disclosing that they were
52.
abused? 52.
Yeah.
52.
Yeah.
So it validates that this person's name is in writing on this database, and it shows somebody actually took the time to care. Yeah.
Yeah. And that could happen to me too. Well, and so then we do have some that have not had any evidence, media evidence. And we have done a few where really only, this is getting to be newer because we're figuring this out still.
Right.
We had one that just went in where she wrote her testimony out for us, and she actually put her name on it. We wouldn't require that to publish the name. We would want it for our own records in case something came up, but
sure.
We don't, they can be anonymous, but we need at least a statement of, say, what happened, and it has to be, and we've read enough now that we're pretty good at knowing what's believable. Yeah. And I think, and as you know, very rarely do people make this up.
Yeah, but it does happen.
It does happen.
I've had it happen.
We've had a few. We've had a few come in that we feel that probably weren't legit.
Yeah.
And
the trolls, we've had trolls.
Tons of trolls. But to be clear, this is a work in progress. And, we're very, very transparent in the regard that we care about the truth. Mm-hmm. And if something is inaccurate, let us know and we'll update it. We'll gladly, do whatever we can to make this right.
We've had people contact and say, this isn't quite right. He wasn't actually convicted or, and we change it. So
I think you kind of answered one of my other questions, because I was, we wanted to ask about credibly accused, because I think that's really important. Not everybody has to have a conviction. Conviction is somebody pled guilty or they were found guilty. At some point they had a conviction, or they're currently on the sex offender registry, something to that effect. But then there's this other category, and everybody in advocacy knows about it, but it's the credibly accused. And those are accusations where there is corroborating evidence that shows that it's very likely that these accusations, the allegations, are could be founded if it made it that far into the court system. They're credible. So I think you kind of answered that, having some of the evidence with, the blog post, or more credible is having media articles.
Right. But that can't always happen.
Yeah.
Also, this one person wrote, I think 2 people now have written a personal testimony that we've put up. But we've also helped link people up to bloggers if they want somebody to really look deeply into their. Then we suggest, we have recommendations to pointing people. We can point people if they want their story, somebody to really look deeply. That's a good route to go.
Sure.
And then that kind of counts as.
Okay. Yeah. One of the questions, this is probably the most uncomfortable question, so we'll get it out of the way. And we've already talked about this a little bit privately, but it's this question of liability. I think this is the biggest, I don't want to say reasons, I think the biggest excuse that organizations have is, well, this would open us up to all kinds of lawsuits and we're not even going to go there. We're not going to touch this. I hear this from denominations constantly. Ironically, every attorney advocate who I know, from Boz Chavijan, who I'm good friends with, Rachel Denhollander, who I'm friends with, Krista Brown, who we had on our show, friends with, who else? Well, those are the ones that came to the top of my head until my brain blanked. But, the attorney advocates, all of them say we absolutely have to have these databases. Yeah. None of them says, I'd think 10 times before you do this. They're all like, yeah, let's do it. Absolutely. So, first of all, I guess, did that initially scare you guys, the liability part of it?
Yeah, that was because how this came up was I was out to dinner with a friend, and we're actually talking about our church trauma page, which we already had. And we were thinking of building that up some and putting resources on there and whatever. And I was just talking to her. And then it just, she's not a Baptist or even in that, realm of things. But I was explaining to her, this is what's happening. And they're calling for a database and, blah, blah, blah. And I said, sometimes I think, why can't we just do it? Maybe we could put that on this website. And she's like, well, why couldn't you? And I'm like, I don't know. maybe we could. And that was the spark, you know what I mean? And it just, that night, like I felt on fire. Like I felt like this is what I am supposed to do. I know it. I don't know. It was just one of those things. Yeah. But I went home to Dom and I'm like, we got to do this. Can we do this? And of course, he's in cybersecurity and he knows laws of, some about all this. And he's like, well, I don't know. Sounds risky. Certainly somebody would have done it by now if it wasn't. And so we just slept on it. And the next day he had really been thinking about it and was like, well, I think if we set it up like, this and this, maybe we could do it. And then another thing is we were thinking through this, we have 2 kids in college now. And a website that they use often when they're signing up for their classes is, I don't know if you ever heard of Rate My Professor. There's a website that's really popular and you can get on there and students are allowed to just leave their reviews of their experience with this professor. And is this a good class? Are they a good teacher? Or, that type of thing. And that came to my mind. And I'm like, well, they don't even have any evidence. They're just letting people talk. Right. And I wonder if they get sued. So I started researching that. And if you just put it in, Rate My Professor lawsuit or something, they've never been sued because the laws protect that. Like if you have a website that's almost like a forum and other people input their opinions, you aren't liable for that. So that was a big, just thing in our brain of, well, they do it. So, how would it work? I mean, we want to have evidence even. So we're not even going to be that willy-nilly. Right.
Right.
I like that word, willy-nilly.
Yeah. Going old school there, Megan.
So we did check in with, we did get legal advice, obviously. Right. So I recommend that. Get a little bit, even if you just have a lawyer friend or somebody you can talk to that'll calm your nerves about it. But a big part too was we contacted you, Jimmy. Yeah. And you told us, this was before we ever had the idea of the database. This was just in relation to speaking out about the church.
Yeah. It was the blog on Narrowgate Cult.
Yeah, we had the blogs and things. We wanted to know, can we use people's names? And you told us, like, they might threaten to sue you, but if you're telling the truth, they don't have a case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I pointed you to a couple people who, I think one who had not been sued. Her and I both received a cease and desist letter together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother story. That was last year. Yeah. We're rebels.
Yeah.
But then I think I pointed you to Julie Roy's, who I said she actually was sued. And that lawsuit was dropped. So if ever you want to find out about liability and what that looks like and what you can and can't say and what the law provides, she would know. It's fresh on her mind.
Really, and when she was so fantastic. When I reached out to Julie, I mean, she was so, she took the time to just explain, a few things and give us fantastic, recommendations and suggestions. I mean, Julie was fantastic and so helpful in that regard.
And she had been through it, so she knew. Yeah, right. And the thing is, are you telling the truth to the best of your ability?
Yeah,
you are. You don't really have anything to worry about.
Yeah.
But she pointed out to us, this was news to us, that most people on your homeowner's insurance, you're actually covered to an extent anyway if you're sued for something like that.
Yeah.
So that and we looked on ours, and sure enough, there was some coverage. And I know you can always, get extra insurance too if you want to.
Sure.
Just to feel safer. But really, from everything we've heard, the risk is really, really low. And we've so far, knock on wood.
Yeah. I've been approached several times about starting one for the Churches of Christ because we have the same issue, autonomous churches. Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. And everybody just turns a blind eye. They know what's going on. They hide it. They cover it up. Yeah. I've had a couple cases in the last week of horrific cover-ups in the Churches of Christ. I see them constantly. And so I kind of started just an informal for my own records, a list of credibly accused or arrested leaders who are still in the church, kind of like how you guys started. And anyway, you're making it more difficult for me to not do this.
Come on,
because it needs to be done. It has to be done. These guys are wrecking people's lives, and the churches who cover for them are wrecking people's lives. Absolutely. And there's got to be some kind of accountability, which is why I love your name, BaptistAccountability.org.
Thank Krista for that. That was her idea.
That's awesome.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah. And, we're not all, to be truthful, this is great, but we're not all that original, right? There are pioneers that have done this. Krista, Krista did the StopBaptistPredators.org. And, there's a site, Anglican Watch. There's the Map List. There's the Preacher Boys, Bishop Accountability, which, truth be told, that's, that was where we kind of got the idea of Bishop accountability. Well, how about Baptist accountability, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a play on that. And, the great work done, in the Houston Chronicles, their Abuse of Faith database. What we're doing isn't all that original.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't that hard. Our cost was $89 for a year of this database.
Wow.
If we can protect one child for $89 a year, crank out the infomercials. This is, a great return on investment, protecting people from going through the hell that is sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse. $89.
$89. That was it.
Wow.
I mean, for sure, the most cost is in time.
It's time.
It's time, and we say this all the time. We could probably input all day, every day.
Yeah.
I mean, just with what's already out on the internet. It's already
out there and documented. And that was how we started is, I talked to Kristen, we did a data dump of her database, the record, what information is in there and has already been validated. And same deal, what's in other databases, because it's public record what's in these databases. I mean,
that was going to be another question. How do you guys find out about new people that you put in, because you're constantly putting people in? Do you guys do the searches, or do people email you, or is it a combination of both, or what?
It's a combination right now. Our vision for sure was grassroots. Everybody contribute.
Right.
Put your it hasn't not that many people have done that. We wish more people would help us research. So here's the call. If anybody's watching, if you have time, please
absolutely
just start scouring and entering in, because as two people, that's very hard for us to do.
Right. Yeah. It's two people.
Yeah. And
two people.
So we're putting them in. But we do get people who put in their own, okay, that past that happened or that's happening now, that they're just, coming forward. We've had people that don't want to be put in. That's been interesting. That was really flooring to me at some points. Like, I didn't realize there would be victims that don't want the perpetrator put in.
Yeah.
Just maybe reached out and wanted to share their stories.
Yeah.
And you have to respect that. And I think that's the hard thing, because that would be a betrayal to them.
Exactly.
You did it anyway.
I think, for me, the hardest thing to navigate. That's been and remembering, because if somebody puts it in and they didn't want it in, like, did you let it in? It's, there's just, it's amazing the ethical things that come up that you're like, what do we do in this situation? There's been a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure what to do, but
being respectful of victims, I mean, Jimmy, for so many years, being a part of, American evangelical Christianity, I don't feel like we ever really listened to people, to victims and whatnot. And only recently do I really feel like, we have the compassion for others to just listen to what you've gone through, and just stepping out in this regard seems to have sparked a response in people that we could have never fathomed or anticipated. People reaching out to us, you're just wanting to share their stories because they feel safe with us, and we want to honor and respect that. Like, this is about a conversation. At the end of the day, it's always about people.
And we do talk to a lot of people
absolutely
that put their things in, and they'll say, could we talk to you? Or, and we're happy to do that. And also happy to talk to anybody who wants to start a database. We've actually had how many?
I know of 2 right now. So, and now Jim, you're third. Jimmy's going to
I know. And this is not an excuse. This is a reality. But
maybe somebody else.
Some days I have a difficult time finding the time to say hello to my wife when she gets home from work. Like, just the workload. I cannot fit anything else on my plate. So in my mind, it sounds wonderful, but it would have to be a team of people, of volunteers who say,
right,
we are going to manage this. You're not even going to think about this.
That's right. So Churches of Christ people.
Yeah.
Somebody can step up who has a little extra time.
The LDS organization, I'm aware of some people within the LDS, Latter-day Saints, that are experiencing, what do we do about our perpetrators? And then there's another one that we're aware of, and we actually met with someone to talk about this, they do it. Which is regarding missionaries.
That is a need, because so many of these men that do this go on missions trips, or if they get caught here, they just go over there. That's a big thing with us. The 2 men that had accusations in the past, well, Don had a conviction, ended up traveling with the same missions organization, which was started by David Sills, who was Jennifer Lyle's abuser. I don't know if you're familiar with her story.
Yeah.
So, that missions organization, I wrote about that on our other website too, that 3 abusers were, and they were all like, you watch their interaction. I even posted some of their interactions at the bottom of that post online, like, buddy, oh, we can't wait to see you, and they're all traveling the world together doing God knows what. I mean, I pray nothing, but what are the chances?
Yeah. Right. Wow.
Right.
So that has been, so I hope someone does it for missions. Also, non-denominational churches. Somebody huge. Needs to do non-denominational.
Yep.
Take our cult as an example. And it was it was a cult. Like, it was a Bible study that became a cult on the campus at Messiah College, right? And that was non-denominational. And so many non-denominational, say, evangelical or even charismatic Pentecostal churches, there's no governing body, and there's no way to protect the sheep. Like, there's such a need for it. And truth be told, it wasn't that difficult.
I mean,
it didn't take us
It took us a month from the time we had the idea
till we had it done.
Well, I was going to say, because Dom, you sent me kind of the template, like a prototype of what the website would look like. You gave me kind of backdoor access, and you were like, this is kind of the layout of what we're looking like. And I looked it over, and I hope you didn't feel like I was just like brushing it off, but like, I looked at it and was literally like, yeah, That's, like I wouldn't change anything. It's simple. It's straightforward. It looks good. It has a good feel. Yeah. And, I was shocked that I was expecting months later that the website might come out. And I blinked and you're like, yep, website's up. I was like, holy cow.
Well, and now that we have kind of the prototype, I mean, Dom has said that anyone who wants to contact us, you can just give them exactly. Well, you were even talking about making like a training video.
Yeah, and just dump it on YouTube, like from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Here's
it's not that hard. Program we use. Here's the platform.
Go to this site. Now you have a website. Picking a domain took forever. Like, what do we call it? We went through so many.
That was the hardest.
That was hard. We wanted Tears of the Oppressed.
Trisha. What am I saying? Krista was the one that actually.
Yeah, we had a committee to talk of what do we call this site. Yeah. I mean, that was hard. Spinning it up was so easy.
Yeah,
quick and easy.
Yeah. Well, I hope that really inspires people because, as individuals, trying to warn people of one person can exhaust us to the point of mental breakdown.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And to be able to have a database that's impartial, it's just facts, it's just information. Right. And at the end of the day, I think that's the importance of a database is people can't come back and be like, well, Benningers, you guys are just stirring up trouble and, in Camp Hill kind of thing, like this is a database. Here are the facts. Mm-hmm. Here are the news articles. Let the facts speak for themselves. If you want to do something with it, that's on you. If you don't want to do anything about this and abuse happens in your church, that's on you too, Yeah.
And I would say one of the other things that's a little tricky is making sure people know about it. Yeah. That's been a little, harder. I mean, we've been in some news stories, but a lot of people still don't know it exists. And I think for it to be useful, so this is good. We need publicity here. It needs to be known to be useful so that people look at it. And
this is so necessary, right? I mean, lawyers and you go to the dentist, you go to a counselor, a therapist, a dentist. I'm in information technology, right? And if I, act bad in a general sense, I can lose my certifications. I can lose my ability to practice, say, law or medicine or whatever. In the clergy, there's nothing to protect congregants.
And in fact, not only is there nothing to protect congregants, but my experience has been 9 times out of 10. I mean, a good 90% of the time, the churches will do exactly what yours did, where, well, can't you guys just extend grace and forgiveness? We're Christians after all, and if you're going to point this person's sins out, why don't we write yours on a whiteboard and put it in front of the church? They don't make that distinction between people who wrestle with temptation and sins that are harmful to you, right. And others kind of by default. They can't make the distinction between that and people who intentionally pretend to be a good person in order to worm their way into somebody's life to steal away the innocence of these little bitty children. They can't distinguish between the two.
Yeah. And where do we draw the line? Like, we struggle with that even to this day, right? I mean, we have, credibly accused, we have different categories, but every day there's more things. Like, should we put in spiritual abuse? For us has been such a major, from the call all the way out, like spiritual abuse and financial abuse. And it was in the news, some Baptist pastor was killing kittens.
Literally.
And,
killing kittens.
Now there's something in the news.
What do you put that under? What category is that?
Right.
A special kitten category, I guess. But
wow.
And there's, in the news yesterday, something about a pastor, like a voting ballot box out in front of the church that wasn't authorized or legit. I mean, is there a category for voting fraud? Like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
And even if you do, we would love to do spiritual abuse, but that's really hard to nail down.
So hard to pin down.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at what point, and it's so tricky and manipulative, and I mean, not that sexual abuse isn't, because it certainly is, but at what point do you cross that line and say this is spiritual abuse?
Right.
And not just somebody who's an idiot and,
Yeah.
and doesn't know how to talk to people. Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough, but it's real. Spiritual abuse is huge.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Very damaging too.
And I'd like to talk to you about that someday, Jimmy, the laws, getting back to the laws. Yeah. I know you were doing something with that, and I don't know if you still are, but I'm a little on fire for that right now because in our situation, the law was so inadequate, first of all. But even the laws that were there weren't followed, and nobody was prosecuted. It wasn't enforced because they did not do the background checks, which was the law.
Or even mandated reporting.
Why did nobody have any consequence for that? That really bothered me.
Absolutely, yeah. So the law in Pennsylvania is that anybody who has regular access to children, that they're required to get a background check. There are the two background checks. So it's the state police criminal background check, and then the other is the child abuse clearances. But I think Pennsylvania wrote this into law too, that anybody who's on paid staff at the church by default has to get background checks, regardless of whether you have regular access to kids or not. So
is that newer, or was that back?
No, that's all since the Jerry Sandusky stuff. That was all written into law like 2013.
Yeah, that was with that. Okay. Yeah. Form. It just blows my mind because the investigator has never really. I've asked, and
a lot of them don't know. And that was the other thing that I found out, because these laws are so brand new in Pennsylvania. I've spoken with attorneys who are like, yeah, we don't even have a clue. And they're like, we call Harrisburg and we talk to the attorneys in the Attorney General's, Josh Shapiro's office, and they say they don't even know. And they're like, well, we'll get back to you. So, this is new, but it goes back to what's right. Dom, you talk about that. What's the right thing to do? Where should that bar be in the church? Yeah. Do we get by and do the bare minimum of what the law requires, or do we do what's right and just and ethical and all that stuff in order to protect kids? But yeah, I'd love to see laws passed that require churches to inform their churches when you have a tier 3 SVP, sexually violent predator, sex offender. Those are the ones that the state police go around, and within a 1 mile radius of where that person lives, they knock on every door and they hang a poster and they let people know. So if the state police are spending that much time and energy and money to knock doors and warn people about tier 3 SVP sex offenders, shouldn't churches also be required to inform their congregants when you have a tier 3 SVP in your church?
Yeah.
And it's not law.
Yeah.
I think, and would you say only tier 3? I'm just because
I would not limit it to tier 3 personally.
Don Foose was, now we don't know for sure, but it looks like he probably pled down from a felony, but he only has 2 misdemeanors, and I would still consider him.
The Department of Education said, this person is a danger to the children of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many questions. We have to have you guys back for about 4 more podcasts. And then we'll solve the world's problems.
That's right.
Mom, do you have any questions? You've been quiet.
They were answered. I know. I was quiet. I was taking it all in. I'm not surprised by what happened to the 2 of you. Not at all surprised by the response of the church. That seems to be an overall response. I have referenced before church leaders as being part of the big boys club, which some people don't like, but I'll cover your back if you cover mine. And that happens so often, as you know, as I know.
Yeah.
And people in general get very comfortable when they're being paid a nice salary, they have a nice home, people love and adore them, and who wants to stir that pot? And I think they fight, kick, and scream, no matter how morally wrong they might be in not disclosing abuse, such as you 2 have done, because they simply don't want to upset the apple cart. The apple is too nice, and it's frustrating. It angers me to know. And I think what you two are doing is amazing. It's awesome. I will do everything in my power to help get word out about what you're doing, because that was one of my questions, which Jimmy indirectly asked, and you pretty much answered: the use of your website. How is it being used? Do people even know about it? Have you gotten reports back that, hey, we were about to hire so-and-so, but we checked first, and boy, oh boy, there it was. That's what we need to see being done now.
We aren't aware. No one's made us aware. Maybe it has. I hope it's happened.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, we want to make sure, that people are aware of what you're doing, of this valuable piece of information that's available, and we need to get it used. So I think all of our listeners will join in and help us spread the word.
Yep. Share.
Yeah.
Share.
Some entries on people.
Yeah. You two are just simply incredible. You truly are. And the work you're doing is amazing. Yeah. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do, because thanks to you, we even had a clue what to do.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, very cool. I will echo that, and you guys have my deepest respect. Yes. And everybody who's listening, BaptistAccountability.org. We will link to this both in the comments section of the podcast and on the post when it goes up on social media. BaptistAccountability.org. And Megan and Dom, I thank you guys a million times over. It was a pleasure having you.
Absolutely.
And I hope we get to bump into each other again soon.
I know. If there are ever any social, things ever again.
If anything ever opens again.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next episode.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.